welcome all members and officers to the meeting of the Development Control Committee, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. This meeting will be recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as practical following this meeting. Everyone participating in this meeting will be accessing this meeting either by the Council's chamber or remote locations. Please, could everybody ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or on silent mode? Members will have received their electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points for the record. The agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones on at that point. At all other times, attendees should keep their microphones off. Please, could all members attending remotely only keep their cameras on for the duration of the meeting, please. If any members or officers wish to raise a point of question, they should press the hands up icon on the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive the request. Please lower your hands once you finish speaking, and the chat button will be disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphones until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of the microphones throughout the meeting, and when necessary will mute those not being used. In the event of a vote, the Democratic Services will call out your name of the member in question in order so they may cast their vote, and the legal officer then will add them up and announce the result. I would also ask officers to introduce themselves as and when they invite to speak during the course of the meeting. They should also ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use, please. I will go now to the agenda business. Number one, apologies. I've got two apologies, Heather Griffiths and Councillor Pratt. Oh, you're here. Right, Jonathan. Sorry, I didn't see you sneaking in. Sorry. Right. Any declarations of interest from members, please? Councillor Richard Williams. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wish to make a declaration for item 9. The applicant is known to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Hughes, please.
Just still on apology, sorry, Chair. Councillor Rob Smith is not attending as I don't believe he's finished the training, and apologies for Councillor Chris Davis.
Okay, thank you for that. Alan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
All right, we're all learning.
Yes, a personal interest for myself in relation to agenda item 8. I'm a member of Bridgend Town Council. I do not take part in any planning matters in relation to that council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Alan. Steve?
Yeah, the same as mine with Councillor Waltham, personal interest as a member of the Bridgend Town Council, but I play no part in the planning.
Okay, thank you for that. Could you put your hand down, Steve, please? Thank you. Anybody else? I can't see anybody else. Okay, that's done then. Thank you for that. Site visits will be on Wednesday the 7th of the 8th, 24. All agree to that? Okay, thank you for that. Minutes. Can somebody move the minutes for the 10th of the 5th, 24, please?
Second.
Thank you, both. Public speakers. We have got a couple of speakers today, and I'll come to that in a minute when we come to the agenda. Amendment sheet. Everybody's had a copy of that, I hope. If not, there should be some at the back. Development control guidance. Well, that's straightforward. It's just for noting. Okay, so we'll go on to number 8, Park Street, and I believe we've got two speakers for this. We've got Councillor Steve Belso and applicant Richard Hopkins in person. Oh, right, okay. Right, so Councillor Belso first, please. Thank you, Steve. You'll have 5 minutes when the clock starts. When you start, the clock will start, Steve. Okay.
Good morning, Chair and Councillors of the Development Control Committee. Here we are again, Councillor Wood and I making representations on a HMO to you. Again, another HMO in Bridgend Central, and one that's in very close proximity to the one that we saw on Park Street just a few months ago. This is the property that was considered a HMO under COM7 in the first meeting, where you declined the other application, and then was deemed to be a different kind of HMO at the second meeting when it was brought back for reconsideration. It was noted at the time by the residents that there was a further local application then, and this is that application. Firstly, and this is important, we as councillors still recognise the need for this kind of property in Bridgend Borough. However, this is yet another one in a very small area. So Councillor Wood and myself would like to take you to your report pack on page 22, which states, in all other respects, development will be expected to meet the relevant requirements set out in other LDP policies. In terms of the above criteria, it is noted a shared regulatory services licence HMO records review has been approved, planning consents and inspection of the surrounding area has identified only 2 HMOs located within the 50 metre of the application property. These are a 6-bedroom HMO at number 12 Park Street and a 6-bedroom HMO at number 14 Park Street. It should be noted that this policy applies to residential accommodation which provides shared housing only. Self-contained flats are not included as part of this assessment. It is calculated there are 28 properties within a 50-metre radius of this application site. Therefore, 2.8 HMOs would be permitted by the LDP criteria. The current proposal would result in 3 HMOs within the 50-metre radius. The proposal would result in a marginal exceedance of the 10% figure. As a building cannot be divided into 0.8 of a property, it is considered logical and pragmatic to allow the 10% figure to be exceeded by a marginal amount to the nearest whole property, allowing a total of 3 HMO properties as opposed to the 2.8 within the 50-metre radius. On balance, the proposal is considered to be compliant with criteria 1 of policy COM7. However, councillors, we would refer you directly to the LDP, which we adopted in March 2024, and it reads, 5.18, Policy COM7 provides the mechanism for assessing proposals for the conversion of existing buildings into houses of multiple occupation. The policy as drafted lacks precision and does not provide sufficient clarity about its requirements in relation to the cumulative impacts of HMOs on an area or an individual property. In order to address these issues and provide greater certainty, MAC 011 is necessary to amend Policy COM7 and its reasoned justification to make clear that development proposal should not lead to more than 10% of all residential properties within a 50-metre radius of the proposal being HMOs or have an adverse impact on residential amenity. In the LDP policy that we have adopted by a majority vote, there is no mention of rounding up or any pragmatism to justify exceeding the 10% in any way, let alone clarifying what on earth a marginal amount actually is. There is no reference to being able to go over 10% in these circumstances, and it does not mention any calculation metrics to justify doing so. It does not state that there is any provision of taking 0.8 of a house. This is not about convenience, it is about adherence to our adopted LDP in relation to the COM7 policy. To remind you what the LDP states, that development proposal should not lead to more than 10% of all residential properties within a 50-metre radius. This application approval would lead to 10.71% of houses within a 50-metre radius. So therefore, it does not fall in line with our adopted LDP under COM7. This is not pedantry on behalf of the councillors who represent the area. These are the actual figures and how it relates to our LDP. It should therefore not be approved, and we cannot continue to place HMOs where there are already too many, or in this case, enough. We also both have serious concerns about the services provided for each room and their sizes, being that people would be expected to spend the majority of their time inside those rooms. We have concerns around the layout of the bathroom and the toilet facilities and ask you to look at those in your proposal pack. Therefore, Councillor Wood and myself would ask that you do not accept the officer's recommendations in this case and that you reject the application on the material ground that it does not conform to COM7 of our local development plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, apologies, I hadn't read of 5 minutes. Sorry.
Good morning. Applicant, please. Yeah. Richard Hopkins. When you start speaking, the 5 minutes will start. Mr. Hopkins. Yeah.
Don't really follow that. I can't follow the policy and procedures. I can just tell you what we do. So I am the applicant and I'm the owner of the property. Bought the property, and the reason we're here today is because I put the wrong planning in. Never had a history of planning before, and when I put the planning application form in, I knew what I wanted in my head. I didn't know it was on paper. So we applied for planning, and we got planning back in 2021, as you can see, and we've got planning for short-term lets downstairs on this. We've got 3 one-bedroom self-contained flats. One is part of the Ukrainian Relief Fund, which we rent out through the council, and we've got a Ukrainian family in there. The second one is rented to primarily to Princess Wales Hospital to support the doctors, nurses, and agency staff that are working there. And the third one is on Airbnb and Booking.com. And we're not here today downstairs is fine. It's a short-term let. It is what it is. Upstairs, we got planning for 31 days. So short-term let. At the moment, we are running as HMO because I thought that was the license we had. We've got people that are working. We've got a gentleman that works in the court. We mud hut them. We check their histories. We don't just take. It's not a hostel. It is somewhere that people can't afford their own properties. They go shared accommodation. And what I respect what the council is saying, they've got their own individual rooms. They've got 2 rooms there. They've got a dining room and they've got a telly room, lounge, whichever they want, which is quite a size. So a separate kitchen, separate communal space for watching TVs with sofas and things. We're welcome to come and see. And then on the top floor, then we've got a bathroom and a toilet. We've got a separate shower room, and we've got another toilet. And then downstairs, then, which is all for the 7 HMOs, we've got a shower room and a toilet. So I think we've got more than enough. Between 7 people, we've got all those facilities. So, quite rightly, Park Street, that building is a prominent place in Bridgend. We bought it in 2020 with the intention of doing an Airbnb. It was historically a pub for years. It was historically a chip shop, which never worked. And we've invested time, me, myself, my wife, time and money, trying to make it a nice place. We started doing some of the work on it. We have got a long way to go. Internal is done. We just need to make this outside look a bit more pretty. So moving on. So well, I respect what you're saying. At the moment, I got 2 options. I either run as a HMO, and the only reason I didn't get the license before was my own fault, and I totally respect that. It was totally my own fault. And I understand you've got numbers and things. From my point of view, if I'm not lucky enough to get, or I'm not able to get planning, then I have to rent it out to short-term lets up to 28 days. And if I rent it out to 20, which I've got planning for, which I do that, then I've got no facility then to mud hut them, and it's going to basically be a hostel or doss house, and that's really not what I want to do. The intention was doing is support. I'm a Bridgend boy, born and bred. I work in Bridgend. My wife works in Bridgend. This is our pension plan, and I wanted to, it's nice to stay Airbnb. We've had if we have a look on TripAdvisor and things, we get a lot of positive. It's central to Bridgend. We don't need parking because everybody can. It's a train station. It was so I've spoken to the planning officer who has requested that we put cycle stands in, or do whatever you want to do to make it compliant. I've got 2 rooms at the moment which the tenants have left, so I've got 5 tenants there at the moment, and I've explained to them that if this securing doesn't go in my favour, then they will have to leave because I want to breach your planning rules. And I've left the room the tenants that are leaving, because if I don't get it, then obviously I'll have to go down a different road, which is not what I want to do. I don't want to be categorised, and I don't want the fact that we are not like certain other companies, homeless charities and things. If anything goes wrong in those properties, it's myself, my wife, or my colleague that actually goes out. So if the tenants have any issues, if they lock themselves out, I go down there. If they have little arguments, as sometimes they do, I am a pacifier. That's what I do. Historically, I worked on the doors for 20 in Townview years. I know how to calm people down, and so I try not to pass it back on anybody on this. Taffies, as we call it, used to be called a pub. We call it Taffies Tavern. We could still call it Taffies. It's my responsibility, and I take that on board. and I want to be compliant. To be honest, I didn't know I did it wrong. And the only reason I found out that I got the wrong plan in is when I bought it on a bridge and loan, and I've never hidden this. I went to put it into a mortgage, and they told me that you got the wrong plan in, and that's the first I heard of it. So I apologise for that today.
Okay. Well,
That's fair enough.
thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Yes, please.
Can I make a point of order, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't know that Mr. Hopkins was the applicant. I've known Mr. Hopkins for over 20 years, so I'm going to make a prejudicial interest and leave the room now. Thank you,
Fine.
Chair.
Fine. Councillor Pratt. Rod, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Roger Davis, Darlington Building Control Manager. This application seeks retrospective planning permission for the change of use of the first floor only of 11 Park Street from use class C6 short-term lets to sui generis as a 7-bed HMO. Since the spring of 2021, the former public house has been utilised as short-stay accommodation with individual rooms to rent on a short-term basis. The 2021 consent allowed 7 bedrooms with shared facilities to be used on a short-term basis with maximum stays of 31 days at the first floor level. This application seeks to regularise the use of the first floor of the building as a large HMO for 7 independent occupiers sharing the same facilities. There are no external alterations and the short-term lets at ground floor will be retained. This application is referred to the DC committee to consider the concerns of the local ward members and the town council. The regularisation of the HMO would retain a well-located and sustainable form of residential accommodation. It is an existing building which has the benefit of a recent consent for short-term accommodation. When assessed against policy COM7, there is only one existing and one consented HMO within 50 metres of this building. The proposal would only marginally exceed the nominal 10% figure. It does not require or include for any extensions or alterations. The overall number of people residing in the building will not increase. The HMO has operated successfully with no apparent concerns. The HMO would also reduce the turnover of tenants compared to the consented scheme, allowing for more stability in terms of the residents in the building. The property does not benefit from any designated car parking area, but neither did the public house or the short-term lets before it, and the use has operated without causing any parking problems. The property is also located in a highly sustainable location, in immediate proximity to the town centre, public transport hubs and other facilities and services. Secure cycle parking will be provided internally as part of the scheme to encourage active forms of travel. The accommodation benefits from existing enclosed external area for bin storage. This retrospective application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You can see the officer's recommendation. Can somebody formally move and second, please?
So move.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions on the officer's recommendation? Right, Steve?
Thank you, Chair. I sit here somewhat with a heavy heart that it's a little bit like Groundhog Day for me. And I've seen the video of the planning meeting on the 4th, the night before I came for the meeting, of which I wasn't allowed to vote and took the officer's recommendation. But we learn from the past. This is what we're told. And this seems like Groundhog Day because, again, as Councillor Bledsoe, who's the ward member, said, that we're in this chamber talking about a HMO, talking about fractions, talking about points. I cannot say that I am proud at this moment to sit on this this DCC committee, which I believe is professional, should be professional, and we are told the planning law is planning law. We are considering going against our LDP. That I've listened to the gentleman, and that's why I have a heavy heart, because I see a businessman who wants to make a difference. I believe that when I was a little boy, we used to have that game where there was one space missing and you would move the tiles around in order to make it all work. I believe in that last meeting, we moved the tiles around to make it work, and we approved that HMO. I would find it very difficult today to approve that HMO because I'm not playing that game. And I think that we can't play games with planning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Hughes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've looked at this application with interest, and my perspective on it is that it seeks to stabilise an existing situation and to accommodate people who are employed in the Princess of Wales Hospital and in the locality. I know from my own experience of visiting the hospital that there are staff who have contracts of 6 or 12 months, and they are in need of accommodation just like this. If we are to sustain our services, our hospital and the business in Bridgend, we do need accommodation for aspiring younger people. And I think that in this particular case, this is what is offered. So I would ask members to think carefully about the implications and possible repercussions if it was turned down. If I could just then refer to the points that have been made by Bridgend Town Council as well, from it's a reference to a subterranean tunnel that leads from the pub ostensibly up to St John's House. If now that issue has been raised, if that could be looked at separately, and that consideration which has been indicated by the Town Council can be looked at on a separate basis. Thank you.
Rod?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the issue was raised. I think obviously in this instance, it's we're just looking at the use of the building. There's no works, but I'm sure the applicant would be willing to discuss with Bridgend Town Council some potential investigations of perhaps a tunnel underneath the building leading up to, I think it's to St John's, House, and we'd be quite interested in that. But unfortunately, because there's no physical works to the building being undertaken on this one, there's no really impact, even if there is a tunnel there. But Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, or HENEB as they're now called, they haven't raised any issues with the potential for any tunnels underneath subterranean tunnels. So we're a bit hamstrung on that side of things, but I'm sure the applicant will be more than willing to carry out some investigations and might find something. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Simon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so Councillor Easterbrook then made a statement that he believes that this development is outside the local development plan. I wonder whether officers could comment on that, please, and whether they believe that it is within the LDP or not. I just want to be sure for my own purposes.
Jonathan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I think we've had quite a bit of debate on this interpretation of that policy in the previous two development control committees, and yeah, on the face of it, mathematically, it could be considered that the proposal does not comply. But with any LDP policy, even the policy that protects the countryside, when you're looking to refuse a planning application, you have to demonstrate the harm. That's the key factor. So the important point, let's take development in the countryside, for example, as an example, if you wanted to build a house in the countryside, it's against policy, because there's policies to protect the countryside, but you'd still have to say what's the harm that house is doing, or house or building, whatever it is. And a similar thing would apply here. We need to demonstrate the harm that this development is causing, and that's the critical bit. And we would say this development is unacceptable because X, Y, Z, and as such is contrary to the LDP. Because the LDP needs to be considered in the round, in the whole. All its policies need to be considered, not just the one. So technically, yes, it doesn't comply on the face of it, but we still have to demonstrate the harm. Now, I take on board Councillor Bledsow's point that there is no clarity in that policy to decide what is minimal amounts or what is minimal over, minimal under. And that's a very valid point to make. But this is the policy that the inspector approved in that plan and then subsequently council approved. So if we needed to elaborate on that policy, we can. We would have what's known as an SPG, a Supplementary Planning Guidance Note. Now, we've not seen the need for SPG on HMO applications because we weren't, shall we say, we weren't inundated with planning applications for them at that time. Yeah. But since then, we've had changes to legislation, which has brought some HMOs under planning control that weren't before. And we've also had a change in social circumstances. There's a housing crisis, and people can't afford to buy houses. They've got no places to live. So there's a social aspect to this as well, and that's something that does find its way through into planning policy. So we may need to have to adapt that policy. So the logical course would be for us as officers to look at a supplementary planning guidance that would perhaps provide more definition on that particular policy. Because quite clearly, we've had a number of HMOs over a short space of time, and that's possibly that's going to continue. Just to say, for example, if we were to employ a planning officer, a low-grade or mid-grade planning officer, that planning officer on the salary that we can offer would not be able to afford to buy a property in Bridgend. So we could have professional level staff that would be looking for short-term accommodation options. So this is the reality of where we are. Okay, that's not strictly relevant to the particular issue, but in summary to Councillor Griffiths' point, yeah, in strict definition, it would appear that it doesn't comply with policy, but I would say that the factors, the material factors that are outlined in the officer's report would set the case to indicate why this is acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Steve?
I got one more question for the officer. I hate to refer back to the planning meeting of the 4th, but could we just clarify, to put my mind at rest, that there was 2 HMOs currently in place that we were considering, and bringing the 3rd one, which would have been number 14. And at the time, number 14 was refused with material objections. A member of this committee was sent away to compile all the material objections. And then when we came back, then it was reclassified that the HMO, I believe, that we thought was the HMO, was not the HMO. So that's either magic or I don't understand that. But anyway, it's almost a bit of this. Can I ask the officers on what date? I know the date of the meeting was the 4th of April. Can I ask what date was the notice of the change of use for Taffy's Tavern. Thank you.
Steve, just for clarification.
Point of order, Chair.
Hang on a second, Simon. Can we not refer back to the previous application? We're dealing with an application for, I've just taken legal advice, right? We just keep to what's in front of us today to discuss what's in front of us, Steve.
Okay,
Right.
it is a relevant point, Chair.
I'm not just, you are right, but
Because on that day that we were debating, or those that were present debating, was on the 4th of April. And on the 4th of April was when the change of use notice went up on the same day.
Yeah.
Are we that detached from what's going on in this department?
Point of order, Chair, that this is not relevant to this application.
yeah. Well, I totally agree with that. I've just taken legal advice. Let the lead. Do you want to come in and?
I want to know what Councillor Easterbrook is implying.
Oh, right. Hang on a second. Then hang on a second. Right. Can you ask the question?
Sorry, Councillor Easterbrook, could you actually? I lost a bit track on your question. What is it that are you implying something, or are you asking just?
Not implying, Chair. I'm just asking that when on the 4th the committee were debating a application for a HMO and having to give consideration to 2 current HMOs, of which I now believe is number 11, that on the same day there was the notice that this, what we're considering today, was actually published. So on the same day, 2 things were happening. That something was being debated, number 14, with consideration of number 11, because that would have been one of the HMOs at the time. And on the same day that the notice was actually being posted on Taffy's about the change of use. So I don't understand how we can debate something.
When you say the notice, you mean the site notice, is
Absolutely.
it? Right. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay.
Rodri can expand on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think you mean the 10th. The 4th was a Saturday. Is it on the 10th of May?
No, the 4th is when we had the meeting.
On the Saturday?
No.
4th of which month, Councillor?
Well, the 4th of April was when we first debated, or I wasn't here, but the committee debated the 4th of April on the 4th. The 4th, they debated 14 Park Street on the 4th of April. And that was going to be turned down, or as a committee we were looking at that. But on the same day that it was being debated in the chamber, that the notice was posted at the same time. So it's almost like councillors and officers came into debate, and whoever posts the notice had gone out through the back door and put that there.
No.
It may be a coincidence, but it doesn't look good in the public eye.
No, Councillor. Councillor, what we were trying to get at...
What is it?
Yeah.
What are you implying, Councillor?
Now, look, you asked the question now, because the legal officer wants to come in now.
Sorry, can you hear me? As long as your point, Councillor Easterbrook, isn't trying to revisit the decision on the 4th, and as Head of Development Control Jonathan Patterson said, as long as you're relating it to the bearing on the facts of this matter, but just for clarity, my question is, you're not trying to revisit the decision on the 4th?
I'm not, because I don't believe that can be overturned.
Thank you, Councillor.
But I believe that it does have a relevance today, because you can't include something and then not include it on a thing. So I just think that we have created a problem for our own self.
Thank you for clarifying the reason why you've raised
Thank you very
it.
much.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay.
Okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. But that was my question, was whether there was an implication to your question, and you did say that you're questioning what was going on in the planning department. That's what you've just said. I can assure you that there's nothing underhanded going on, and stake my professional reputation on that, Councillor. As I made clear previously, there was an officer error when we reported that application initially, but we're not talking about that previous application. So we can find out exactly when the application that's currently being debated, we can find out when that was advertised, but what bearing it has on the decision or the recommendation that's in front of you, I'm not altogether sure. But if it's just a technical question that you're asking, when was it advertised, we can find that out. I'll just reiterate that if you're not happy with the application, we have to be looking at what the material impacts are. That's the crux of the matter. Okay, but we'll find out that date when that site notice went up.
In the paperwork, it does say that the site notice was on the 4th. And
Right,
obviously,
okay.
me reading the paper, which are public, that my concern really is of me as a councillor and a member of this committee, and certainly we as a planning authority, that it is open and transparent. And anybody who watched the videos would see that as it was being debated on the 4th, including a property that was being included, that there is a planning notice going up on the same day. Now, that might be coincidence.
I fail to see what the relevance of that is, Councillor. If you could clarify what it is you're suggesting.
You're either going to include something or you're not going to include something.
Yeah, I think what we're getting confused with now is what we thought was a consented HMO and what was actually being applied for. At that point, that application on this 11 Park Street had not been determined. It was not a consented HMO.
Okay.
So that's where the confusion arose, because the officer for 14 Park Street thought there were 3 consented HMOs in that area. As it transpired, this application, this site has not had the consent. So technically, it was only 2 HMOs within that 50-metre area. Now, with this application now, which we're considering today, now there's technically 3 in that 50-metre area.
Okay,
so that's why
I do take your response,
bring it back,
and as I say that we sit here, each application is done on its own merit,
right.
that we only base it on, we don't come predetermined, that we come and listen to the debate. However, when there is confusing information that we are being asked to vote on, then we need to have the information as councillors, so there cannot be no doubt in it.
No. It should also be noted that at the time when we corrected members on the fact that there are only 2, and that brought it down just below the 10% in the 50-metre area, at that point you actually wanted it to be rounded up. So we can't work it both ways, really. So what we're trying to say is, like John said, if there's any harm, this has been operating without consent as an HMO for a few months. There have been no concerns, no issues, and probably people haven't been aware that it has been used as an HMO. So what we've got to look at, where's the harm in that? This building, okay, it's nominally within 50 metres of the other 2 HMOs on Park Street. But it is almost a standalone building. It's been operated privately. The applicant is looking after the premises, vetting who's actually living there, and that's all we can look at, really. If it's been operated correctly and managed properly, then it's difficult for us to say we should refuse this because it's 0.14% over the policy.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, I've just had notification from the officer that put the notice up, and the notice was put up on 4th of April in the evening, so it would have been after the committee had sat. But again, that I would just reiterate that is purely coincidence. That's when the application was submitted, and there is always a delay with consultations usually, but that's the date that that site notice went up. Is purely coincidental. And just to go back to Rodri's point there, it's planning is a balancing exercise. So you've got to balance one side against the other, and in some cases, some elements of the scheme outweigh the benefits of a scheme can outweigh the negatives. And that's what balance in planning is all about, and that's what the officer does when coming to a recommendation. And if you read the conclusions of planning reports, that balancing exercise is there. And if you look at the conclusion on this particular application, you'll see a similar exercise. But you've heard from the applicant today, and you've heard from a local councillor who has raised concerns. And as a committee, you need to make that balancing exercise based on the facts and the information that's in front of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Steve, there's a legacy hand. I take it, Alan?
No, Chair, just a couple of comments, really. Going on the 10% rule brought in to regulate HMOs within a 50-metre distance of residents' properties. It's obviously brought in for a purpose. All I would comment is, once you've broken a rule, there's no going back. That should be put out there. Once that rule is broken once, there's no going back. You've got to go forward. The other comment I would have is, and I thank Councillor Hughes for bringing up the Town Council's comments in relation to the possibility of a historical passageway in the cellars. I just wonder if a condition could be put in there, please, for that matter to be fully investigated by professional, relevant people. And if it is of an historical purpose, it should be preserved, really, and belong and come part of the heritage trail in the Town Council. So I just don't want that to be forgotten about, to be perfectly honest. And I'm pretty certain Roddy said that the applicant would look at that. Yeah. But I would like it in writing, please, and set out properly. Thank you.
Yes, you'll have to put condition. Yeah.
Well, we won't be able to put condition on. It's not relevant to the development.
All right, to make sure.
I take your point on the policy, and I've explained that situation. I hope Councillor Wathen previously in this meeting. And if we want to look at that policy in more detail, then there's the option for the authority to consider further supplementary planning guidance on that matter. And that's something that would be a matter for this committee. It's this committee that formulates SPG. You as members, you would be involved in that process. In terms of the passageway, whether it is there or not, we don't really know. We would struggle to put a planning condition on this consent because it's use. There's no physical works being undertaken. So there's no implications for any passage that may or may not be there. And that really would be a matter for the applicant to discuss with the Town Council as to and the archaeological body and CADU. We couldn't put anything on there. We couldn't demand that be carried out as part of this development. It's for change of use, so I think we'd struggle with that. But we could put an informative note on any consent to alert the applicant and any future developer that there's the possibility of archaeological remains under the building. I mean, the building itself, in relative terms to the rest of that part of Bridgend, isn't that old. It's quite young compared to the rest of Newcastle Hill and the architecture that's on that stretch. But that's not to say that there was something there previously that could have had some archaeological remains. But that's something we could put on as an informative, and any future developer or owner of that property will be able to see that on the planning consent. And it'd be a matter then for them to liaise with the various bodies and the Town Council to see if it's feasible to do any. It would have to be non-intrusive work, because the ground floor of this building is actually got an authorised use, and there are people living there. And I couldn't put a condition on that would involve digging up parts of that building. So, but I think there could be other methods using ground radar or something that could be done to investigate it.
Okay. Okay, Al.
Yes, thank you for that. Would it be possibility of deferring this application for that investigation to be carried out?
No. As I've explained, Councillor, we can't. This is not a material factor for this particular application. We're not dismissing the fact that there may be archaeological remains there. We don't know. We've got no evidence to suggest that there are. There's no physical evidence. There's no historical evidence. There is just one comment we've had from the Town Council, which I'm not disputing. I'm not suggesting for a minute that that's not in any way accurate, but we've got nothing to defer this application on. And the applicant in this case could legitimately appeal against a non-determination, whereby that decision will be taken away from this authority to determine this application. Yeah. But as I said, we could look to put an informative note on the consent to advise any developer, any future applicant to consider whether any remains within this area can be logged, or there may be some way of doing it unobtrusively, but we can't have people's living rooms being dug up on the back of this, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Della.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, obviously, with the previous application, I did vote against the when we was looking at the application for number 14 Park Street, where we thought there were 2 other HMOs. But I think looking at this application now, and the fact that this already being operated, or not as a HMO, but the short-term lets, it's being operated seemingly without any issues. It's already got planning permission in the round. So for me, on this occasion, I would be minded to vote for this one on this occasion.
Thank you for that. Can you take your hand down, Del, please? Councillor Easterbrook, please.
Chair, I don't mean to take all the time with this. I see that it is a retrospective. We've heard that it is retrospective planning. And in our training, we've been told that if it would have passed originally, then there's no reason why it can't be passed as a retrospective. That I don't know if you can tell me when the applicant realised that he had been operating on the wrong licence, because obviously it was operating as a HMO, but didn't have that classification.
I think the applicant has already explained that, Councillor, when he had his 5 minutes discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is, on the bottom of our sheet, it says no more paperwork to follow. But if you look on the planning portal, there's quite a history of Taffy's Tavern and the planning applications and that type of thing. That I don't know the full extent, but on the 26th of the 3rd, 21, Bridgend Town Council have noted that there was an enforcement put on that. I don't know what the enforcement was, but it said due to validation problems. So I'm just wondering what the problem was back in 2021 as to why there was an enforcement.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. We could certainly look for that information, and maybe we can supply that during the course of this committee. But what I would say, Councillor, is that you're here to discuss this application that's in front of you now. Yeah. And all relevant facts and all relative material considerations are outlined in the officer's report that you've had sight of. I can't say any more than that. But we will try and find out what that enforcement issue was. But if it is relevant to this particular application, it would have been included in that officer's appraisal.
Simon?
Yeah, just a comment. I think I'll go back to Jonathan's comments much earlier about this has been operating in this way for some time, and there's no harm being shown, I think, recently at all. And so I think on that basis, I'm minded to allow this to go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Can you put your hands down, gentlemen, please? Thank you. And I would just see if there's anybody else wants to ask a question. Councillor John.
Thank you, Chair. It's been an interesting debate. I'm just wondering if we could put it to a vote. Thank you.
I was just going. You've just beat me to it. That was my next point. I was just about to say. Thank you. So we will go. Oh, Steve, you've had your 5 minutes. You can't speak again. Sorry. I got to be straight here, right? You know, if I let you do it, I'll have to let everybody else do it, and then we'll have the applicant wanting to come back, and it'll open all worms again. Sorry. Thank you. Right, we'll go to a democratic vote then. Is somebody here from
I'm over here.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Right. Steve, can you call out the names then, please? And
Absolutely.
then the monitoring officer will make the list.
Okay. Councillor Barrow.
For.
Councillor Easterbrook.
Against.
Councillor Granville.
For.
Councillor Simon Griffiths.
For.
Councillor Martin Hughes.
For.
Councillor Della Hughes.
For.
Councillor Mark John.
Against.
Councillor Mike Kern.
For.
Councillor Alan Wathen.
Against?
And Councillor Richard Williams.
For.
I think that's it in terms of those who were present at the meeting.
Okay, thank you for that.
7 for, 3 against.
So that's for the applicant then. Thank you very much. Okay.
You have to get Councillor Pratt back in.
Oh, yeah, can we get Councillor Pratt?
I'll get him now.
All right, okay.
Dion's away, so, oh, he's going to sort
Yeah. Next one is item 10.
I have some information about item 10, if I could just tell you, Chair.
Come on.
The objector had to leave to go back to work, but on his way out, he handed a colleague a note, and he wondered if it could be read out at this meeting.
Oh, the guy with the high vis, yeah, he was going to speak.
Yeah, but he's not here to speak, is he? But he's given a note. I don't know.
We have done it in the past.
Yeah, can you give it to the monitoring, our legal officer, and she can read?
Item 10.
Yes. But he was here in the instance. Well, that's fair enough, I suppose.
What's the person's name?
Yeah, Mark Sage. Yes, yeah, on here.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go on to item 10. I'm sorry this is a bit back to front, but that's the way the public speakers come in. Have we got no say in that? And we'll have the first, no, you can come in second. Oh, he's the objector. So let's go to Eleanor Davis.
Should we do the speech first? No, I'll let
She's the applicant, isn't she?
she's the applicant.
All right.
Applicant.
Yeah.
Right.
You'll have 5 minutes for when you start speaking.
All right. Just a second. I think I'm ready. Shall I press the button?
Yeah.
Press the button? Yes. Okay.
You can, it's on already.
Right. So I just start.
Yeah.
Sorry. Dear committee, dear chairman, committee members, planning officer, and others. I am the applicant. My name is Elena Davis, wife of John Davis. I will answer the objection and as they were formulated. That was my intention, but the more important is, and I will come back to the others, the applicant is running a business from the property. I do not have a business, sorry. I think everybody knows what fostering means. I thought not everybody heard about adult placement scheme, also overseen by the councils. There are adults with learning disabilities which require care and support. Individuals are carefully assessed by the council social workers. Then referrals are made and the adult placement department tries to match families willing to share their life and environment with these individuals. I am also working with other professionals such as healthcare professionals, NHS, social services from the council, day centers, community transport, and nevertheless, our own communities. Personally, I do try to do my best. This is what I am doing, and I do since 2020. I do not have a business. Now I'm going to 7. The community van affords passengers with views into bedrooms of adjoining properties. It is completely wrong.
to accuse passengers from the community minibus unless somebody is uncomfortable exactly with these passengers, because they cannot see anything more than everybody can see from the road. No ability for emergency vehicle or community bus to turn on the property. The property has a large courtyard. The vehicles can turn if they wish to do so. Southview access considered inadequate for extra habitable dwelling. This is a repeat of another objection. It's not an extra habitable dwelling, it's an ancillary to the main dwelling. Highway safety concerns. Delivery always came. A motorhome is regularly accessing the road and nobody has concerns about. Visitors, everybody have. Community transport for 2 disabled people which are living with me in the main dwelling since 2022. Have always coming to pick them up and drop them back in the afternoon. So nothing has changed or is going to change. Furthermore, just to mention that after moving to the above address, the shared road between myself and the objector had some cracks. This got larger after we received some heavy materials. Therefore, my husband and I have paid $3,000 and nobody else contributed to remake it as a concrete road. As you can see, we are cooperative and approachable. We are honorable people, believe me. So I can go back to a few of the others objections, which are actually more statements or suppositions or cannot be proof. Waste could overload sewer. I don't see how that can happen because the same people who reside in the main dwelling to the above address will use the ancillary too. We don't live a chaotic life. We don't do loud parties. We respect the value of this country and we respect the community we are living in. Respectfully, sorry. I am asking you to consider if there are any real reasons to stop this application or if you purposely have been misinformed. And for your knowledge, actually I am accused that in the future I may change this ancillary to a habitat, to a dwelling. We did have approved a planning permission for a bedroom, three bedroom house, but we chosen to not to build it. Therefore, it's not the intention to change an ancillary in a dwelling. That was P09459 full. Also, it said that the Southview Road, oh, sorry.
Yes, you're out of time.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Thank you. But before you read that out, I'm just going to get some water. Okay, over to you.
I'm Gillian Dawson, the legal officer here. I've been asked to read a statement of the objector, Mark Sage, who is unable to be present. He's made 8 points. If more than 5 dwellings, road would have to be widened, single lane, brackets. 2, adequate lighting erected. 3, pedestrian walkways. 4, drive for the use of 2 Southview and 1 Southview is agreed only for use of occupants, not another habitable dwelling. 5, strain on drain sewer services. 6, not wide enough for emergency service vehicles or turning there. 7, community support bus reverses down drive every morning with full view in bedroom window. 8, an adequate vision display at bottom of lane, would have to remove corner of Valley View bungalow garden wall. Traffic is a lot busier. Dwelling could be sold as a separate dwelling in future. End.
Thank you for reading that out. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Dion Douglas, Senior Planner here at the Council. As you all have gathered, the proposal involves the proposed use of the now completed one-bedroom annex, which is located within the curtilage of One South View for residential purposes. The building was constructed following the initial granted planning permission for a garage in 2014. However, as the garage was not being built in accordance with the approved plans, a retrospective consent was sought and approved in 2018 for a garage with loft storage above. The building is now completed and has been fitted out as a residential annex. This, however, is in conflict with a condition imposed on the 2018 consent, which stated that it was to be retained as a garage store and shall not be occupied for residential purposes. The applicant now seeks to use the annex as ancillary accommodation for family members or persons living under her care. The property is accessed via a private shared access, South View, which runs up from Lower Adair Street. South View provides access to 5 bungalow dwellings and countryside and farmland above. Turning to the current proposal, 4 objections were received from nearby neighbours, along with representations from Councillor Griffiths and the Gar Valley Community Council. My report contains a full description of the concerns that were raised. I won't repeat those. The proposal has been considered against relevant legislation and the replacement LDP. The key issues to be considered in the determination of the application is the principle of the use, its visual impact, effects on residential amenity, impacts on biodiversity and highway effects. The site is located within an established curtilage area of a residential property between the dwelling and its outbuildings. In this context, the change of use would have no impact on the rural edge character of the area. The use of the building as an ancillary habitable accommodation would provide additional accommodation for family members or other persons who may be under the care of the applicant. Alterations to the building from the approved garage plans would not be significant and would not harm the character or appearance of the site or the wider area. The building is not proposed to be used as a separate residential unit, but ancillary accommodation. A condition of approval has been recommended to ensure that this is the case. Neighbours have raised issues with the increased use of the private access. However, Highways advice indicates that the anticipated level of use would be acceptable. The use of the annex would likely result in minimal vehicle movements if the occupier or occupiers were to own a vehicle. There is adequate on-site parking available, and large vehicles such as the community bus are able to turn around on the site. In summary, the proposal is considered to be supported by relevant legislation and the policies of the replacement LDP. The use is considered to be an acceptable development of this residential property, providing additional accommodation for family members or persons in care. The loss of the garage storage would cause no adverse transportation effects, as adequate parking remains on the site for a 4-bedroom house and a 1-bedroom annex. Furthermore, the width, formation and alignment of the existing vehicle access has not been found to be of an unsuitable standard by a Highways officer. In conclusion, the application is recommended for approval subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions of consent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You can see the officer's recommendation for granting it on page 67. Can somebody formally move in second, please?
Move.
Nobody? Can you just say that for the mic, please, Al?
Second.
Seconded.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions of the officer's recommendation? Oh, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just to make the observation again about retrospective planning permission that we got a garage which has been subject to not one but two retrospective planning applications in the space of 6 years. You know, the planning system is set up so that members of the public and ourselves can consider applications before they proceed and not to be put on the back foot. I think by the continuation of this type of application of being retrospective, it does put people on the back foot and it irks people and it doesn't make for good communication within the community and conversations that could otherwise be positive. So I just wanted to make that point in this particular case. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Della?
Similar to Councillor Hughes, looking at it, so it's the third retrospective application relevant to this property because there was one was altering an access. So just for an explanation really, is in the beginning, the description of the development is that the garage was granted consent, should be retained and not occupied at any time for residential purposes. So now in the conclusion to this report is stating this in accordance with policies and complies with future wills. So can somebody just explain to me then that if this is the case, why, if it was stated not to be used at any time for residential purposes originally, how does that marry up then? Because there would have been reasons and policies why it couldn't have been used as residential at that time, and now it can. So just to clarify that, please.
Dion?
Go on, I'll answer. Thank you, Chair.
That was a bit of a lottery then. Which one was going to answer that then, Del?
The application predated the case officer.
It did, yeah, it did, to be fair to him. Probably predated me. We do put conditions on sometimes to control the use. Otherwise, if we hadn't put that condition on, it could have been converted as an annex within the curtilage of the residential property without a subsequent planning application, which would have allowed us the opportunity to assess its impact. As it's happened, this garage, as far as I'm aware, it's been fitted out for residential accommodation, but it hasn't actually been used for residential use yet. So the elderly have been looked after within the main house at the minute. But one bedroom will be in the annex in the future. It's still an annex. It's still never going to be sold off as a separate dwelling. We've controlled that. The loss of the one garage space is not deemed to be an issue, considering the amount of space within the driveway there. I understand that the minibus that picks up and drops off the elderly occupiers has enough space on site to maneuver and come out in a forward gear. So yes, it's if we hadn't put that condition on, I suppose in the first place when it was supposed to be a garage, then it could have been converted without the need for any more planning permission, and we wouldn't have had any control. As it stands, we retain that control, and we can at least have an application now to look at alternative uses for that building, and this is what's come in. And as the applicant said, they did have, I believe, a separate consent for a completely separate dwelling on this land, and instead of doing that, they're looking at converting an existing outbuilding within the curtilage, which we would normally allow if there are no other issues with that. So yes, it's retrospective, but in terms of the fit out, but not retrospective in terms of the use of that building as it stands at the minute. Thank you, Chair.
So can I just ask, when we say in retention of living accommodation, so it's not been used as living accommodation, but it's been set out ready. So how has this come to us then? Has the applicant is it retrospective because there's been a complaint or because the applicant realised that they should apply for planning permission?
Thank you for that. Yes, it's retrospective because of complaints. Obviously, you'll see some of the planning history on the property. There were complaints about alterations to the access. It sort of stemmed from the feedback and the outcome of that.
Anybody else got any questions? Oh, Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just going through the objections again. And one of them, when it said annex could become a separate dwelling, I'm assuming that is a context of I've built a garage, now I've converted it into a home, now I'm going to sell it off as an entirely separate property. And is there anything under planning law that we can do to prevent that the whole site remains as one? Or is that sort of in the hands with the gods, so to speak? Thank you, Chair.
Jonathan will answer that question for you, Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, it's a good question to bring up, actually, Councillor. At the moment, the planning unit is the single dwelling with the converted garage in the curtilage. That's the unit. If that converted garage was to become a separate residential dwelling, it would be a new development. It would create a new planning unit and planning permission would be required. And we'd have to go through that process and we'd have to look at it on its relative merits going forward. But at the moment, as it stands, this planning consent would only grant planning consent for the use that's in the description that's in front of you. So no, it wouldn't grant the consent for a separate dwelling. But if one came in, if an application came in to consider that, we would have to look at it on its own merit. I think Roddy's mentioned that there was a previous consent for a separate dwelling in the curtilage. But things move on, things change. And when we granted that planning application for the garage, that was 10 years ago. And the conditions we applied then may not necessarily be the conditions we put on now. Since then, we've had appeal decisions and changes of policies, etc. But to answer your question, it would need another planning permission. Thanks.
Okay, I can't see anybody else asking any questions. Well, you can see the recommendations. It's been moved and seconded. Are we all in favour, or do you want to vote on it? So I take it everybody in favour?
Can we have a vote, Chair, please?
Okay, nobody against?
I'm against, Chair.
That's passed then, thank you. Okay, we go back now to number 9, please. Oh, sorry, Simon. You were on mute. Sorry, I didn't see you. Go on. You're still on mute.
So Councillor Mark John asked for a vote, I think?
He did, but he wasn't seconded.
Was that on the previous application?
That was on the previous application, wasn't it?
No, sorry, Chair. I did ask for a vote because I was against it. When you said, is anybody against, I said I'm against it.
Right, okay, sorry. Right, okay. Okay then, we'll take a democratic vote then. But it's not.
Thank you, Chair.
Can somebody second Councillor John's?
So I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, right. So let's go to a vote then.
Okay.
The officer will call out your name. It's either against or for.
Councillor Barrow.
For.
Councillor Easterbrook.
For.
Councillor Granville.
For.
Councillor Simon Griffiths.
For.
Councillor Martin Hughes.
For.
Councillor Della Hughes.
For.
Councillor Mark John.
Against.
Councillor Mike Kern.
For.
Councillor Pratt.
For.
And Councillor Richard Williams.
For.
Sorry, Councillor Watham.
Yeah, against.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
9 for, 2 against.
So that's carried. Thank you. So if we go to item 9, Phil?
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of this recording, my name is Phil Thomas. I'm a team leader in Development Control and case officer for this application submitted by Mango Planning and Development Limited on behalf of Nathaniel Car Sales to develop a greenfield site on the southeastern corner of Waterton Industrial Estate. The site will accommodate a new building which will be used as a vehicle preparation, maintenance and MOT testing centre. To facilitate the proposed use, it will be necessary to remove areas of dense scrub and vegetation on the northern site boundary and part of the woodland to the east. Members, I draw your attention to the plan on page 39 of your report, and if I can now try and share a plan with you just to assist. Bear with me. Not that one. We'll get there now. Right. There we are. That's a enlarged version of the plan that's on page 39 of your report. I just want to highlight there so members are clear. You've got 3 key areas of trees and vegetation on the site. If you look at the aerial photographs, it looks like more, but a lot of it is scrub. And there has been already some site clearance undertaken. The areas that will be cleared, I'll highlight with a cursor, they're the hashed areas with a black outline. So there's an area there, an area at the southern area there, and the rest of that woodland and areas of woodland will be retained. And to me, the key woodland area along the eastern of the boundary, and there is vegetation and woodland behind that, will also be retained. Just to pick up what this red hashing is that what they call an area where construction will be excluded, a construction exclusion zone, and you can see that it will be concentrated within that area. That's built construction because part of that site will be laid for the storage of cars. So just wanted to be clear what is taking place in terms of the application. To reconcile the difference in site levels, the land will also be regraded and raised. There is a difference between the road level and the site, and some initial work has already taken place. An extract of the site layout plan is reproduced on page 27 of your report, and you will note that to the northwest of the building, there will be an area for the charging of 7 vehicles, a cycle store and bin store. A further 19 car parking spaces are provided for staff and visitors to the southwest of the building. Adjacent to the building will be an enclosed jet car wash facility which will utilise recycled water. To the east and northeast of the building, the regraded land will be laid to gravel to provide secure storage for vehicles. It is estimated that the new facility will create approximately 15 full-time jobs and 5 part-time jobs, which the applicant suggests will be recruited locally. Context is all important to this application, members. The site is situated on an undeveloped part of Waterton Industrial Estate, as I've said, but immediately adjacent to the boundary with the Vale of Glamorgan and less than 30 metres from the curtilage of the nearest residential property in the village of Treoes, which is southeast of the site and separated by an area of broadleaf woodland. To the north of the site are existing manufacturing and storage operations, whilst the land to the southwest is used for open caravan storage. The site location plan on page 28 shows the relationship with adjoining land uses. The access arrangements as amended through the determination process will comprise a single access egress arrangement to the site from a new arm of the existing Brocastle Avenue Park Crescent roundabout junction. This replaces the in-out arrangement that was part of the original planning submission and opposed by our colleagues in Highways. The report provides some background to the applicant company, which is an established car sales business operating from its head office on Bridgend Industrial Estate. Draw your attention, members, to the responses received from the statutory consultees, and you will note that no objections have received. That hadn't been the position from the start, and it's through the submission of amended plans and various technical reports relating to noise and ecology that previous concerns have been addressed. Members should also note the comments from the Vale of Glamorgan Council, who have no objections subject to a condition controlling the hours of operation. A series of consultations have taken place with residents, and there still is significant objection to the application for the reasons set out on pages 31 and 32 of your report. That's been backed up by an objection from Llangan Community Council. The concerns raised are around encroachment on the village, noise impacts, impacts on ecology, effects on flooding, pollution. They're the headline objections. Many of the objections align with the main considerations in the assessment of the application. Members will note that the applicant's agent has provided a response to the objections raised by the Community Council, and they are reproduced on pages 32 and 33 of your report. Members, the main issues for you to consider in the determination of the application today are listed on pages 34, and I'll try to summarise those for you now. Firstly, it's the principle of the development. Does it accord with the policies of the replacement development plan? I can perhaps just put that up on the screen for members. Residents would suggest not. They maintain it represents a further encroachment on the village and should be retained as a buffer. Alternative sites should have been considered. Those of many of the residents have objected on that basis. In the new replacement Bridgend local development plan, the land is allocated and protected for employment purposes. Policies ENT1 and ENT2 refer. The erection of a building for vehicle preparation and maintenance, as described, falls within B2, B8, and is therefore in accordance with the allocating policy. The principle of this land being developed for the uses proposed is acceptable, given that the land is allocated for employment development and has been over many years, and it's been taken forward again in the latest development plan. There's no requirement on us to consider alternative sites, as we have to consider the application submitted before us. Having regard to the policy framework within the replacement local development plan, the principle of development of the site in the manner proposed is considered acceptable. Second point, dealing with transportation active travel provision. Residents have suggested the development will potentially add additional traffic through the village of Troyes to the detriment of their safety. The occupiers of the adjoining site questioned the suitability of the access arrangements as originally submitted, and indeed whether the delivery vehicles would be able to manoeuvre within the site. In brief, the application has been accompanied by a transport assessment, has been examined by our colleagues in Highways, and they've offered no objection to the application. Matters relating to the connection to active travel routes and public transport have been considered, along with the proposed access arrangements, which have been amended to address concerns. Operationally, the site will be able to accommodate deliveries via articulated vehicles without affecting highway safety, and adequate car parking can be provided. Furthermore, the TS concluded that the volume of anticipated trips for the development will have a minimal impact to traffic volumes within the existing industrial estate and the wider highway network. Despite the concerns of residents, there's no evidence on highway safety grounds to justify an objection to the proposal. Now, the concerns now about impact of the layout and design in terms of biodiversity. Members will know that national policy reminds us as decision makers that we have a duty to enhance biodiversity and resilience of ecosystems. Recognising the development needs to take place and some biodiversity may be impacted, the planning system should ensure that overall there is a net benefit for biodiversity and ecosystem resilience. Many of the objectors, unsurprisingly, have expressed concern about the removal of trees and vegetation to facilitate development and the consequential impact on habitats and wildlife. The Green Infrastructure Statement that accompanies this application recognises that the development will result in the removal of existing vegetation within the site, and I draw your attention to the plan again in the report that discusses site clearance. The areas to be cleared predominantly consist of sprawling scrub, mainly goat willow, but also including hawthorn, blackthorn, sycamore and elder. These groups have been classed as Category C trees within the agricultural report submitted with the application. No trees are to be removed from the woodland to the eastern boundary, which includes Category B trees. The Green Infrastructure Statement follows the stepwise approach as set out in Planning Policy Wales. We must avoid, minimise, mitigate, compensate, and in this case, provide long-term management. NRW and the Council's own ecologists have reviewed the submission and concluded that while some green infrastructure will be lost as part of this development, based on the submitted evidence, that will be limited, subject to controls being put in place, which includes the requirement for an ecological clerk of works to be on site for any site clearance, and I just draw your attention at this point to an additional condition on the amendment sheet, and a precautionary approach being taken. The development is on balance acceptable. Furthermore, ecological enhancements and a habitat woodland management plan, as set out in the submitted documents, will be delivered throughout the development. Next key issue is the impact on living conditions of the residents with respect of pollution, mainly noise and lighting. This is possibly the key issues for the residents' perspective, with concerns around the proposed operations on site affecting their living conditions given the closeness of the site to existing properties. In their view, the development will add to the disturbance caused by existing businesses on the estate. Based on the OS base plans, the application site lies some 50 metres west of the nearest dwelling, which is Pantglas, which is located, as I said, in the village of Treoes, with the distance being measured from the dwelling house to the eastern site boundary. So just to be clear, that's the actual dwelling house, not the boundary of that house. Approximately 100 metres will separate the proposed workshop building from the nearest dwelling house, just to give you a bit of context. A noise impact assessment has accompanied the application, and on the top of page 41 you can see the site in red and the nearest sound-sensitive receptors, i.e. the existing houses. Colleagues in shared regulatory services have reviewed this report, and in simple terms, without controls without controls being imposed, there would be an adverse impact as a consequence of the proposed site operations. Members' attention is drawn to conditions 9 on your report, where works will be confined to the building, which will be acoustically treated. Condition 10, that sets noise levels for all operations and plant on site. Condition 11, that requires the submission of a post-operational noise survey and a requirement to agree and install additional noise mitigation if the levels in condition 10 are not being achieved. And conditions 12, 13 and 14, that time limits certain activities on site, basically that they're not too early or late in the day. As officers, we're confident that compliance with these conditions will offer reasonable safeguards to the amenities of residents. Other than the position of the lighting, we don't know too much about that at the moment, but we have imposed a series of conditions, and I draw them to your attention, 6, 7, 8, which will require the details of the lighting to be agreed, both in terms of protecting wildlife, but also the residents' amenity, post-operational monitoring of the lighting, and a post-operational survey of the lighting to make sure it achieves the levels that we will set through the condition. Members, planning seeks to achieve that careful balance of delivering commercial uses on sites allocated for such uses, whilst also reasonably safeguarding the amenities and living conditions of existing residents. Subject to the imposition of planning conditions that will control operations on site, both in terms of noise and lighting, that balance can be achieved. The last point covers issues to do with flooding and drainage. Members will note that a flood consequence assessment accompanied the application. The applicant's supporting planning statement suggests that the development of the site and the raising of levels will have an immaterial impact on flooding elsewhere. The small risk of minor increase in flood levels on land to the north has been agreed with the affected landowner. Not surprisingly, the potential for this development to affect the drainage regime within the village of Treoes has been a significant concern to residents, particularly those closest to the site. Natural Resources Wales have reviewed the flood consequence assessment and note that for the site to tie into the existing road levels, it will have to be raised. In this post-development scenario, the flood consequence assessment shows that in the 1 in 100 year, the proposed development site is predicted to be flood-free, and that meets TAN 15. In the 1 in 1,000 event, the site is predicted to partially flood to approximately 0.1 of a metre in the northwest of the site, with the eastern boundary predicted to experience flood depths up to 0.5 of a metre. These depths are within the tolerable limits set in TAN 15. The hydraulic modelling has identified that although the extent of flooding to third parties is not predicted to increase, that means it won't increase in area, the depth of flooding is predicted to increase by less than 0.05 of a metre during the 1 in 1,000 event. This is to an area of land already experiencing flooding. It should be noted that a letter has been received from an owner of the land to the north accepting the impacts of the additional flooding, and it will not have an impact on the residents. They're outside the flood zone. The Council's land drainage team have also reviewed the application details and the submitted flood consequence assessment. They note the position taken by Natural Resources Wales and have concluded that on the basis of the evidence, the development will only lead to a small increase in flood depth over already flooded commercial land, and that any objection to the development on this basis would be difficult to sustain. On other matters of site drainage, based on the drainage strategy submitted, subject to conditions, those can be agreed and will be acceptable. Members, the conclusion on pages 46 and 47 summarises all the issues that I've discussed thus far. The principle of this development is acceptable. The impact on biodiversity interests is limited and we can be managed and mitigated through new planting and management of the retained woodland. Without conditions, the use of the site could affect the living conditions of residents, but controls will be put in place through the consent. Impacts on highway safety and drainage have been considered, but there's no evidence of significant harm. Accordingly, the recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions, and the additional condition on the amendment sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. You can see the officer's recommendation on 47 for granting. Can somebody formally move in second, please?
Move. Seconded.
Thank you. Any questions for Phil, please? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In relation to, I mean, it's if it's in ENT1 and ENT2, I suppose it is what it is. But has the boundary changed in our revised local development plan? Because I mean, if you go onto Google Maps, Trost does have a nice barrier between the industrial estate and their village, obviously. But I mean, has that boundary always been there, or has that been an addition to our revised local development plan? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the question, Phil.
The boundary is basically defined by the boundary between two authorities. That's as far, our LDP can only go as far as that, and that hasn't changed. That allocation has gone right up to the boundary of the County Borough Council, which is cheek to jowl with the boundary of the Vale of Glamorgan. So if this is an extract from our own mapping system with the LDP layer applied on top of it, I think it's helpful because you can just see that. So if we can just zoom in that a little bit for you. You can see this is where the edge of the village is, but that's the boundary of the Vale of Glamorgan and Bridgend, so that the allocation is within that. So that, as far as I can see, Council, that hasn't changed over various iterations of the development plan. Yeah.
Happy with that, Jonathan? Thank you. You could put your hand down. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, I can't see anybody wanted to ask a question. So are we all in favour of the application? Anybody against? That's carried then. Thank you very much. If we can move on to the agenda then. Appeals on page 11. I don't want to go. If anybody's got any questions, please ask and specifically what you want to discuss in the appeals. Have anybody got any questions on the appeals? No? Okay, thank you for that. Training is as it was. We had a good one yesterday. You can see the next one is PEDO, and we're waiting for the date for that. And then public rights away, then tree policy, green infrastructure. So we've got some good ones coming up. So we just need to firm them up with a few dates. Other than that, that's where we're at with the training log. I haven't had any urgent items whatsoever given to me. So I will now formally close the meeting and thank you all for attending, home and away.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.